In May of 1992, an astounding Qigong practice caused a sensation in Beijing, the capital city of China. With its profound principles and miraculous effects, it took this ancient city by storm. The news traveled fast as word spread from person to person. Very quickly, the practice found its way to over 50 countries and regions around the world, and has been warmly welcomed by those governments. In a few short years, it has attracted 100 million followers. This is Falun Dafa, introduced by Mr. Li Hongzhi. Since the beginning of civilization, mankind has always been drawn to explore the meaning of human life. Our ancestors believed that the human body is part of the integrated entity of the immense universe, and through cultivating the mind and body, harmony between human beings and the universe can be achieved. People called the methods of cultivation the Tao, the Way, or the Fa, the Law. They longed for the opportunity to listen to great enlightened beings teach the Tao and lecture on the Fa in person. Throughout history, cultivation practice has been enshrouded in a veil of religion. People kept their faith in orthodox religions, stayed away from evil, and believed in goodness, cultivated themselves, nurtured their characters, and believed that this would lead them to return to the wonderful worlds from whence they came. For this reason, they lived free, fulfilling lives and were full of hope for the future. In order to pursue cultivation, some gave up their comfortable life and went into the mountains to cultivate the Tao in solitude. The exploration into human life and the universe from the perspective of spirituality is often regarded as something beyond reach, or even something superstitious. Are there still cultivation practices that transcend the ordinary and depart from worldly mediocrity to elevate the spirit and uplift both the mind and the body? One day in 1992, Mr. Li Hongzhi and a few of his students attended the International Health Expo in Beijing and introduced the public to a cultivation practice that he established, Falun Dafa, also called Falun Gong. With his profound teachings and supernatural abilities, he won the hearts of those at the expo. At the conference, Falun Dafa was awarded the highest recognition, and Mr. Li Hongzhi was given the title of the most popular Qigong master. In the 2 years following the expo, at the invitation of local Qigong associations around China, Mr. Li Hongzhi taught Falun Dafa and visited almost all major cities in China. Close to 20,000 people attended the seminars taught personally by Mr. Li Hongzhi. The number of students reached up to 4,000 or 5,000 in each of the seminars offered by Mr. Li in the later period of his teaching. This was unprecedented. In his teachings, Mr. Li Hongzhi unveiled a secret unknown by most people, that Qigong practice is cultivation, and cultivation originated from prehistoric civilization. Prehistoric civilization is also called prehistoric culture, which is being studied nowadays to a great extent. In June 1968, American scientist William Meister found a trilobite fossil with a human footprint on it. The footprint was left by someone who wore shoes. The trilobite is a creature that existed between 600 million and 260 million years ago. Meister's discovery proves that human beings existed at that time and that, moreover, they had achieved a certain degree of civilization. In the same year, American scientist Dr. J. Mason Valentine discovered a huge underseas edifice near the islands of the Bahamas. After some tests, it was determined that this architectural structure had a history of 10,000 years. There have been many similar discoveries. Scientists publicly acknowledge that those discoveries are relics of prehistoric civilizations existing long before this present human civilization. It is known that in every civilization there were saints or enlightened beings who taught people methods of cultivation. At the beginning of this human civilization, there were Lao Tzu in China, Sakyamuni in India, and Jesus in the West. Even though they were oceans and continents apart, the teachings they imparted were very similar. Similar to any orthodox practice, Falun Gong has also been passed down from a very remote age. Mr. Li Hongzhi modified it to accommodate modern times and has made it public for the purpose of helping people elevate themselves to high levels. In his lectures, Mr. Li pointed out that there are two fundamental reasons as to why people's cultivation energy doesn't grow as they practice Qigong. One is that they don't know the principles at high levels, so they don't know how to practice cultivation. The second is that they haven't paid attention to cultivating their Jing, mind nature, or moral quality. Mr. Li said, "There exists a fundamental characteristic in this universe. It can be summarized in 3 words, and they are Zhen Shan Ren: truthfulness, compassion, tolerance." Mr. Li also expounded on the correlation between Qigong practice and sports, and Qigong and religion, and he explained the fundamental cause of illness, the relationship between Chinese and Western medical practices, and the differences between alternative Qigong healing and traditional hospital treatment. In 1995, Mr. Li compiled the contents of these lectures into a book called Zhuan Falun, to provide systematic guidelines for people to cultivate themselves in their quest to achieve higher levels of enlightenment. Those in search of a genuine cultivation system have literally climbed the highest mountains and crossed the deepest rivers to find the well-known masters. But after coming upon Falun Dafa and reading Zhuan Falun, they discovered that they had found the very thing they had been searching for all their lives. They found in this one book the answers to the questions they had about the universe, life, mankind, and cultivation. Among Falun Dafa cultivators, there are people of all different professions and all different ages. There are also many people from the scientific community who have master's and doctoral degrees, and people who are medical doctors and college professors. Even though they've mastered the most advanced technology, they can still see flaws in today's science. Upon listening to Mr. Li's flawless explanations of the human body, matter, morality, illness, time, space, and the universe, they were drawn to China's ancient cultivation culture and stepped into the practice of cultivation as well. In his book and in his lectures, Mr. Li expounds on the different meanings of Zhen Shan Ren, truth, compassion, tolerance, at different levels. He also explains how to cultivate Jing, how to be a good person, or even a better person. Contemporary science discovered that a person's mental and emotional state directly affect his physical health, practitioners' Jing improvement has resulted in significant improvement in their physical health. In September 1998, a research team staffed by medical school faculty members and other specialists conducted a study on the mental and physical health of over 10,000 Falun Dafa practitioners in more than 10 cities in Guangdong province. According to the study, almost 10,000 practitioners had suffered from at least one ailment before they started practicing Falun Dafa. After practicing cultivation for a few months or 2 to 3 years, 70% of them either fully recovered or basically recovered. Falun Dafa is a practice that cultivates both the mind and the body. In addition to cultivating Jing, the 5 sets of gentle exercises are easy to learn, and anyone, the old as well as the young, can learn. Although there are only a few movements, the practice is quite thorough.
Buddha showing 1,000 hands is the first set of Falun Dafa exercises. The basis of this exercise is stretching to open up all of the energy channels. Exercise 2, Falun standing stance. Penetrating the 2 cosmic extremes is the third set of Falun Dafa exercises. It is the practice of penetrating the cosmic energy and mixing it with the energy inside of one's body. Falun heavenly circulation is the fourth set of Falun Dafa exercises. Practicing this exercise enables the energy of the human body to circulate over large areas, not in just one or several channels, but from the entire yin side to the yang side over and over again. This exercise, strengthening divine power, is the fifth set of Falun Dafa exercises. It is a tranquil cultivation exercise, a multi-purpose practice to strengthen divine power, including supernatural capabilities and energy potency, by turning the Falun using Buddha's hand gestures.
As soon as one begins practicing, places where energy is congested in the body are opened up, large amounts of energy from the universe are absorbed, and the waste substances in the body are eliminated, so that the body is cleansed and purified. The energy mechanisms that Falun Dafa cultivators carry in their bodies function 24 hours a day and do not stop. Mr. Li called this phenomenon Fa cultivating people. When a cultivator practices the exercises, the Falun, which is a continually spinning law wheel, and the energy mechanisms in the body are reinforced. This has solved the problem wherein people don't have enough time to practice because of their busy schedules. The cultivation principles of Falun Dafa are based on the evolution of the universe, which is constantly rotating. That's why the practice is not concerned with time, location, and orientation. There is no mind intent, so its practitioners won't go astray. Although the benefits of Falun Dafa are quite miraculous, Mr. Li Hongzhi absolutely prohibits his students from using this practice for personal gains. He frequently points out that the imparting of Dafa is to guide people to practice cultivation toward high levels, and he requires that his students seek neither fame nor profit, conduct no worship of any individual, teach the practice on a voluntary basis, and do not get involved in politics. Falun Dafa cultivators and their free teaching banners can be seen everywhere, in public parks and plazas. The beautiful music and peaceful, slow movements are noticeable contrast amid bustling crowds and noisy traffic, and seem to offer a piece of pure land in the midst of chaos. Since 1992, Falun Dafa has won over 500 awards in over 50 countries worldwide. As Mr. Li Hongzhi has said, "Those who hear about it look for it. Those who obtained it treasure it. The number grows day by day, and they are countless." Throughout the ages, To practice cultivation and obtain the Tao has been the dream for countless generations of people. For this dream, many left behind their wealth, possessions, and families to search for it, painfully and painstakingly. Today, Mr. Li Hongzhi has already laid this truth, this great law, this Dafa, at the feet of everyone. Please be very sure not to miss this chance of a lifetime. Falun Dafa is in this human world. Near or far, all are related through predestination.
In July 1999, China's President Jiang Zemin began a nationwide crackdown on Falun Gong, a peaceful practice guided by the universal principles of truthfulness, compassion, and tolerance. This ancient practice for mind, body, and spirit has benefited millions of people in over 50 countries around the world. Threatened by its growing popularity in China, Jiang Zemin is now leading a brutal and unrelenting campaign against Falun Gong. To avoid condemnation from the world, Jiang has been using every means within his power to carry out this persecution. The most highly publicized example of Jiang Zemin's strategy is the self-immolation that took place in Tiananmen Square on January 23, 2001. 5 people set themselves on fire. Jiang's regime used this horrific event to turn popular opinion against Falun Gong. What is the real truth behind this tragedy? According to China's state-run news agency Xinhua, at 2:41 p.m. on January 23rd, on the northeast side of the People's Hero Monument, a man named Wang Jindong set himself on fire. 4 policemen immediately surrounded the man with several fire extinguishers. In less than 1 minute, the fire was put out. A few minutes later, on the north side of the People's Hero Monument, 4 women also set themselves on fire. A minute and a half later, the police had put out those fires. The entire scene played out in less than 7 minutes. Somehow, the Xinhua news agency broadcast its report of this incident to the whole world within 2 hours of the time of occurrence. Normally, every report from Xinhua must be approved by all levels of government before it can be broadcast to the public. However, news of the self-immolations was broadcast in an unusually short time. This strange occurrence surprised the foreign correspondents in Beijing at the time. The Beijing Evening News reported on February 16th that there were 3 or 4 policemen putting out the fire of each self-immolator. Altogether, they had about 25 pieces of firefighting equipment. This story differed significantly from the program broadcast by Chinese Central TV on the day the incident occurred. The CCTV program showed that there were only 2 police cars at the scene. Police officers who patrol the square do not normally carry firefighting equipment with them, and the footage doesn't show any firefighting equipment in Tiananmen Square. In Beijing, the closest building to the People's Hero Monument is at least 10 minutes away. Where did the policemen get the equipment, and how did they get it so quickly? Why would 2 police vehicles be carrying 25 pieces of firefighting equipment to patrol Tiananmen Square? Were they expecting to put out a fire that day? The Xinhua news agency claimed that Ms. Liu Chunling died from self-immolation, but a closer look at the video shows she might have died from a hard blow to the head. If we slow the video down, we can see that while Miss Liu struggles in the fire, she is struck on the head by something from behind. We see Miss Liu knocked to the ground. We also see the object that hit her bounce off her head into the air. If we pause the tape, we can see someone's arm waving very close to Miss Liu's head. We can also see a man wearing an overcoat, standing at the spot where the object came from. His pose suggests someone who has just used force. We can clearly see that the stick-shaped object bounces off Miss Liu's head on impact. It is not carried along in the flow from the fire extinguisher. Instead, it flies the other way, against the force of the extinguisher. The flying object is bent. We can see how hard the impact is. Miss Liu falls immediately. We can even see that as she falls, she tries to raise her left hand toward her head. The question arises, did Miss Liu willingly set herself on fire? Why would someone want to knock her down? Why didn't that person try to save Miss Liu from burning to death? From the Chinese Central TV program, we can see that the camera follows the policeman to the site where the fire began, and even zooms in and out to catch just the right details of the drama as it unfolds. Normally, the surveillance camera in Tiananmen Square covers a fixed area, but on this particular day, the camera follows the police to the scene and zooms in to focus on the incident. It seems as if this camera was set up specifically to tape the self-immolation. The Chinese media claims that it was CNN journalists who recorded the close-up shots, but the head of the international department of CNN stated that CNN did not film anything because at the very beginning of the incident, CNN reporters were arrested and their equipment confiscated. CNN did not have a chance to shoot any footage. When we look again at the tape from Chinese Central TV, we can see a man carrying a camera bag at the scene. He seems to be shooting the whole incident from close by. Who is he? Why didn't the police stop him the way they stopped the CNN reporters? Why would the government lie about the source of the videotape? Why wouldn't they reveal the source of the close-ups, even if they were taken by a policeman who just happened to be there on that day? The CCTV footage also shows the police officer behind Wang Jindong holding a fire extinguishing blanket. He doesn't use the blanket immediately as one would expect. He is just holding it and looks as if he is waiting for a signal from the burning man or waiting for the photographer to take a picture. Is it coincidental that this footage was shot within 1 or 2 minutes after the fire broke out, and that it was shot from the best angle? Even more unnatural is the fact that when 12-year-old burn victim Liu Shuying's life is in danger, she is not sent to the hospital right away. We can see that someone takes a close-up shot of her and records her voice before letting the ambulance take her to a hospital. Mama! We can only wonder, what are the priorities here? Saving a young child at all possible costs, or collecting evidence for future use? Was this event planned and a 12-year-old girl used as an unwitting victim of a dangerous game? Let's take a closer look at some of the self-immolators who the Chinese government claims are Falun Gong practitioners. First, let's examine the man who set himself on fire. Government officials say he is a Falun Gong practitioner named Wang Jindong, and that he is responsible for coordinating the incident. In the Chinese Central TV film, we see a policeman waiting behind him. Only after Wang Jindong shouts does the policeman cover him with the blanket. A person's respiratory system is usually the first to suffer in a fire due to smoke inhalation and exposure to the hot air. Yet this man's voice seems in good shape. He shouts loudly and clearly. The words Wang shouts in translation are, "This universal Dafa is something that everyone has to get through." Anyone who has read Falun Gong material knows that this statement has no basis in Falun Gong. In actuality, Falun Gong emphasizes that people have predestined relationships with the Fa, or the law. And in his book, Juan Falun, Mr. Lee mentions many times that not everyone can obtain the Fa. Nevertheless, these words and the way Wan Jindong is sitting are the basis of the Xinhua news agency's claim that the self-immolators are Falun Gong practitioners. There are no other corroborating facts. Indeed, the way Wang is sitting is not characteristic of Falun Gong either. Falun Gong requires practitioners to sit with both legs crossed while meditating. The position is called the full lotus position. Beginners are allowed to sit in half lotus position with just one leg crossed over the other until they develop the flexibility to sit in the full lotus. As we can see in the video, the man Xinhua claims to be a Falun Gong practitioner is not even sitting with one leg crossed. The media reported that Wang Jindong had been practicing Falun Gong since 1996. For someone who had practiced for so many years, isn't it strange that he is unable to sit in the full lotus position? Wang also fails to correctly form the very basic hand position called Zhi Ying, which is the first position in all Falun Gong exercises. All Falun Gong practitioners learn to form the Zhi Ying position correctly by slightly touching the tips of both thumbs together. We can see that Wang overlaps his thumbs in a completely incorrect manner. Many people have noticed that the way Wan Jindong sits is exactly like a Chinese soldier. Some suspect that the man who set himself on fire was a spy hired by the police to put on this show. When we compare this man to a photo provided by the government, which shows Wang prior to the self-immolation, we can see that the scalp line of the self-immolator is very neat all the way across the top of his forehead. We can't see his hairline. It even looks like he might be wearing a wig or a mask. It is common knowledge that human hair burns very easily and quickly. It was reported that Wang Jindong was seriously burned, yet we can see that his hair remains untouched and forms a clear-cut line above his forehead. Wouldn't his hair be one of the first things to burn? How can it be so neat after he was engulfed by flames? And oddly enough, he stays seated while on fire. Footage of burning victims shows that they experience intense pain, and they usually do not remain in one position. Could Wang Jindong be wearing fireproof clothing? He looks bundled up, as if he's wearing layers of extra clothes. Even the ears of the Wang Jindong in the CCTV film don't match those of the man in the photograph. Look at the photo of Wang. The ear is close to the head and the shape of the ear is long, whereas the self-immolator's ear is small and round. Was the man who set himself on fire the real Wang Jindong? Notice the plastic Sprite bottle between the man's legs. It looks brand new, as if the flames never touched it. Government officials claim that Wang Jindong drank gasoline from the Sprite bottle before he set himself on fire, and that he was very seriously burned. How is it possible that a plastic bottle filled with gasoline, encompassed by a burning man's legs, remains in perfect condition? There are more discrepancies in the stories reported by the Xinhua news agency. One involves Lu Chunling, who was a self-immolator apparently knocked down by a stick-like object thrown at her. Ms. Liu is the mother of the 12-year-old who also set herself on fire. According to a detailed government report dated January 30th entitled Documentary of Self-Immolation, Ms. Liu started practicing Falun Gong before March 1999, before the Chinese government launched the persecution of Falun Gong. However, a story published by the Washington Post reveals a different fact. Philip Pan, the Washington Post reporter who wrote the story, went to Ms. Liu's hometown in Kaifeng City, Henan Province, to find out more about her. Ms. Liu's neighbors told him that they had never seen her practice Falun Gong. The article published by the Washington Post attracted a lot of attention. To cover up the discrepancies, Xinhua news agency reporters quickly changed their story. In a February 8th news program, Xinhua reporters stated that Ms. Liu started to practice only after the crackdown of Falun Gong began in July 1999. They said she practiced at home and didn't let others see her because she was afraid that her neighbors would find out she was a Falun Gong practitioner. This attitude is not characteristic of Falun Gong. Practitioners are encouraged to practice outside, and they welcome the opportunity to tell people about the practice. This report also claimed that Ms. Liu frequently beat her mother and daughter, behavior that is again in direct conflict with the teachings of Falun Gong, which promote compassion and tolerance. It is hard to believe that this woman was a Falun Gong practitioner. Xinhua's embellishments to the story continued. Another alleged self-immolator, Liu Bairong, was never mentioned in the news agency's first report, and there is no footage to show she was in Tiananmen Square. However, a week after the incident, she appeared on a Chinese Central TV program to speak against Falun Gong. She claimed she was prepared to self-immolate, but changed her mind at the last minute when she saw the others burning. She said she drank half a bottle of gasoline on that day to prepare.
I drank about a half bottle and wanted to pour the rest on my body.
Drinking 1/10 of an ounce of gasoline per pound of body weight will cause death. For her weight, half a bottle of gasoline would be enough to kill her. Even if she could be saved in time, she would suffer severe symptoms from having been poisoned. But if you watch her on TV, you can't see any evidence that she drank that much gasoline.
We received 4 patients. They all had serious inhalation wounds to the trachea. They were in danger of choking at any time. So at the same time we operated on their surface burns, we also immediately performed a tracheotomy.
In a tracheotomy, a tube is placed in the throat below the vocal cords so the patient can breathe. The patient cannot use his mouth to breathe, and air cannot get to the vocal cords and larynx, so the patient cannot speak. It takes many days for an adult to adjust to this condition, and much longer for a child. If a patient really wants to speak, he has to cover the tube opening, but the voice will be intermittent and unclear. Yet the reports from an interview of the 12-year-old victim by the Xinhua news agency present a different picture. The little girl was in such serious condition, her trachea was cut open, yet she could talk with the interviewers so loudly and clearly after only 4 days. Furthermore, standard medical procedure dictates that patients with large areas of burned skin be placed in an isolated, sterile room, because the burned area needs to be exposed to the air. This prevents infection and makes it easier for the nurse to apply medication and clean the wounds. Doctors and nurses treating these patients are required to wear masks and sterile clothing when entering the room. Yet, when we look at the CCTV footage, we see that the patient is in an open room. We also see that the patient is wrapped in thick layers of gauze bandages and that the nurse is not wearing a mask. Neither is the reporter wearing a mask, gloves, or any sterile clothing. Why would a patient in such critical condition with such serious burns be treated so casually? Authorities did not allow any reporters other than those from the Xinhua news agency to interview 12-year-old Xu Ying, nor did they allow any of her family members to visit. The authorities even threatened her grandmother to such an extent that the elderly woman was terrified to be interviewed by any reporters. 2 months after the incident in Tiananmen Square, the hospital announced the sudden death of Xu Ying. Did this 12-year-old, who was able to sing just a few days after a tracheotomy and major burn surgery, really die? How did this happen when she was in such remarkable condition after the event? And why was she under such tight security that even her family was not allowed to visit? Since its introduction to the public in 1992, Falun Gong has been spread in over 50 countries. In the 7 years prior to the onset of the persecution, there had never been a single case of self-immolation among Falun Gong practitioners in China, nor has it ever been known to happen to any practitioners outside China. Since July of 1999, Falun Gong practitioners have endured the vicious persecution waged by the Jiang Zemin regime. Practitioners have been fined exorbitant amounts, fired from jobs, expelled from school, beaten and gang-raped by police, held captive and drugged in mental hospitals, and even tortured to death. The state-controlled media has launched a massive slander campaign that includes trying to link Falun Gong with cults that believe in suicide and killing. This is despite the fact that the teachings of Falun Gong prohibit violence, suicide, and killing of any kind. Because of their deep convictions, Falun Gong practitioners have always appealed in a totally rational, peaceful, and nonviolent way. The purpose of this apparent staging of multiple self-immolations is clearly to incite hatred among the Chinese people toward Falun Gong practitioners and to discredit Falun Gong in the eyes of the world. However, all information about the self-immolations that occurred in Tiananmen Square was blocked. Access to the victims and the scene after the incident was restricted. Only Chinese government officials were allowed to conduct any investigation. The interviews of the victims, conducted by the state-run Xinhua news agency, resulted only in more questions about the authenticity of the self-immolations and further speculation about the role that Jiang's regime had in orchestrating it. No third-party investigation has ever been allowed to uncover the true facts. The horror of this self-immolation incident truly reveals the lengths that the Jiang Zemin regime will go to in its attempt to wipe out the practice of Falun Gong.
Persecution of Falun Gong, a worldwide campaign by China. The extreme persecution of Falun Gong practitioners in China is well documented. It's simply inconceivable to us that any government would systematically brutalize, torture, and murder its own citizens for exercising their most basic human rights. But China has been doing exactly that to Falun Gong practitioners for over 2 years.
Chinese government. Tang Yongji says he was severely burned by Chinese police because he refused to give up his beliefs in Falun Gong. After being left to die, he escaped to Hong Kong and hid inside a fruit crate on its way to California.
Would the Chinese government dare to export its campaign of hatred and suppression to the United States? The answer is yes. Under a directive given by China's President Jiang Zemin to, quote, intensify the struggle overseas, end quote, the Chinese government has been systematically attempting to wipe out Falun Gong right here in America. This is no idle threat. The Chinese government has directly taken part in interfering with the proceedings of local and state governments, as well as our national government. In the United States Congress, House Concurrent Resolution 218 urges China to stop the persecution of Falun Gong in mainland China. What about the Chinese government's efforts to impose its will on Falun Gong practitioners right here in the United States? Can a foreign government, a communist regime, dictate the behavior of American politicians? The answer again is yes. We call on all people with compassion and justice in their hearts to help us stop this injustice. What follows are just a few of the alarming cases of interference by the Chinese government in United States domestic affairs. The targeting of U.S. government officials who have honored Falun Gong. American officials from all levels of government who have bestowed honors on Falun Gong have been targeted by the Chinese government. New Jersey Congressman Donald Payne was asked by Chinese embassy officials to withdraw the Falun Gong notice in the congressional record. Maryland Governor Paris N. Glendening was pressured into writing an apology letter to the Chinese government after awarding Mr. Li Hongshi the title of honorary citizen. Mr. Li Hongshi is the founder of Falun Gong. Mayors in Seattle, Baltimore, Saratoga, Alhambra, Santee, and St. Louis, Missouri are some of the people who have been asked to rescind proclamations given in support of Falun Gong. Fortunately, many mayors remain firm in their recognition of Falun Gong. For instance, former Mayor Stan Bogosian of Saratoga, California, who had this to say regarding his run-in with the Chinese government.
Last year in November, when I was mayor of Saratoga, I issued a proclamation in support of Falun Gong. Shortly thereafter, I had received a request in the form of 2 individuals from the Chinese consulate to rescind that proclamation. And since that time, I have received continuing pressure to tone down my involvement and my speaking out for people's basic human rights. And I'd like to take this opportunity to call upon my fellow elected officials in this county to come forward and speak up on this very important human rights issue, because if we don't speak, no one will. We will then, down the line, live to regret the fact that we didn't come forward when the issue affecting so many people was so crucial.
Mayor Stan Vopel of Santee, California, was also disturbed by the consul's request.
I was chilled to the bones that a communist nation would go to this extent to suppress someone's freedom of action in this country. That's what really bothered me.
Chinese consulates have also tried to direct the decisions of human rights commissions against Falun Gong. On April 17th of 2001, Consul Wang Yunqiang of San Francisco sent a letter to Larry Lee, the vice chairman of the commission, slandering both the practice and its founder. Commission member Charles Ward was outraged that a foreign government official would meddle in the affairs of the commission.
I'll say again that I'm offended by having been sent this letter by the Chinese consulate. If there's a way to enter it into this record, I'd like to enter it. What the Chinese government in San Francisco has been doing to smear Falun Gong, this is some of the evidence of it.
Obstructing Falun Gong practitioners' right to peacefully assemble. In February 2001, the Chinese Consulate General of Los Angeles asked Pasadena city officials to make the Pasadena Civic Auditorium off-limits to Falun Gong practitioners. According to General Manager Rick Barr, quote, "A day after they called the Pasadena Civic Auditorium, the consulate dropped off anti-Falun Gong pamphlets. What I told them was I was providing them. Falun Gong had contracted for the auditorium, and we did not discriminate based on beliefs." End quote. Freedom of the press has also been under attack by the Chinese government in its drive to wipe out Falun Gong. In a letter to the World Journal, the #1 circulated Chinese newspaper in the United States, the San Francisco Consul General pressured the newspaper to stop running Falun Gong ads. A Houston newspaper, the Chinese Southern Daily, also stopped running articles about Falun Gong after a consulate representative spoke to the newspaper's president and his family. Also in Houston, the Baoshanjing Library was pressured by the Houston consulate to stop carrying Falun Gong books. In the summer of 1999, Borders Books in Pasadena was pressured by its headquarters to stop carrying Falun Gong books in its store. Around the same time, the distributor of Falun Gong materials in North America, Sino United Publishing Bookstore in Monterey Park, was also pressured to stop selling Falun Gong books. This caused a great disruption to the supply of Falun Gong materials here in the United States. The Chinese government has also spread its malicious campaign against Falun Gong to college campuses. In February 2000, the Los Angeles Chinese Consulate asked Caltech to cancel an annual Falun Gong conference. Caltech not only refused to comply with the request, they instead provided 2 guards to protect both entrances to the auditorium. This, however, did not quell the consulate's efforts to stop Falun Gong activities on the Caltech campus. 2 days before the Caltech Falun Gong Club was to present a workshop to students, the consulate contacted school officials to ask that the event be canceled. These are only a few examples of the blatant attack on civil rights the Chinese government has openly carried out here in the United States. Can this disrespect for the civil and human rights of citizens and residents of this country be allowed to continue?
That I know that justice is indivisible. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere.
For the spirit of freedom, which has been the very soul of this nation, we fervently hope that the answer is a resolute no.
Of course, I've read about the persecution of Falun Gong practitioners in the newspapers, but it was actually meeting some Falun Gong practitioners and hearing firsthand their experience that made me realize we needed to do more to raise the world's profile to this issue.
Falun Gong's guiding principles are truthfulness, compassion, and forbearance. The practice is peaceful, non-political, non-religious, free of charge, and of great benefit to practitioners' health and moral standards. Introduced to the general public in 1992 by Mr. Li Hongzhi, Falun Gong is practiced in over 50 countries around the world. Before the crackdown, 100 million people were practicing Falun Gong in China, more than the members in the Communist Party. Afraid that the movement was a threat to his power, Jiang Zemin initiated a ban on Falun Gong in 1999. He thought that he could eliminate Falun Gong in 3 months, but he was wrong.
To see such terrible persecution for me, it was just absurd. And I couldn't understand at first why it was happening. I felt, my duty was to talk about human rights and freedom, because it's very important. I couldn't understand why they were persecuting such good people.
The persecution is very, very severe. For example, with Falun Gong, you have thousands of people who have been detained. They have been sent to re-education camps. The leaders have got sentences from 2 to 18 years. The normal practitioners have been given re-education sentences of up to 3 years. They have been subjected to torture. There have been over 200 deaths in custody. And all this for the peaceful expression of their freedom of belief, which is guaranteed in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which China is a party to.
I am a master's degree student in university in the UK, and I went back to China in 1999 just because we are Falun Gong practitioners. We were arrested for 7 days, and they beaten us. Although I was an 8 months pregnant woman, after several days they deported us back to the UK, and just 1 month later, my daughter Minghui Yu was born in Swansea. They told me that if we carried on practicing Falun Gong, my daughter Minghui would never be registered, and she would never get her own passport. Since then, we have no choice. We had to be asylum seekers.
They did not register Ming Hui on the passport of Zheng Fang Mo or her partner as a Chinese citizen. So I've been trying to establish the citizen status of Ming Hui, and I think it's not right that any young child, obviously, is denied the right of citizenship, which is a fundamental human right that it should be open to us all.
I think the case of Zhao Ming in particular highlighted in a very specific way the problem that exists for people who practice Falun Gong, and the fact that he had been a student here, was living in Dublin, made it very real for many people, and I think as well forced the Irish government to take it up in a very specific way when the Chinese Premier was here in Ireland some time ago.
He's been in prison in a labour camp in China since May 2000, and he was just recently released on March the 12th from Tuanhe labour camp near Beijing. And we're here today to welcome back to Trinity and to his new life, Zhao Ming.
During a period of 2 weeks, I was only allowed to sleep only 1 to 2 hours each day during the 2 weeks period. And on some other occasions, we are physically punished, forced to do a kind of military squatting for a very long time, more than 10 hours a day. And it's really very bad to my legs. Now I still feel having no feelings at the bottom part of my legs. Just 2 weeks before I get out from the living camp, 5 policemen using six electric batons to shock me all over the body, and the electricity is over at least 30,000 volts.
We want the Irish government and other European governments to put real pressure on the Chinese authorities, and I think that the pressure has to be stepped up considerably. It is just not good enough that people are in large numbers, or in any numbers, being persecuted, being thrown out of their work, being imprisoned, being sent off to camps and so on for their beliefs, when they are obviously not in any way interfering with other people's rights or doing criminal or other damage.
The crackdown of Falun Gong is really going ahead in a very brutal way. We have been following the situation since summer 1999, and when we got the first news about deaths in prison, we had been shocked. But what we are seeing today, it's really a catastrophe.
Methods used in the persecution include beatings, electric shocks, slave labor, sleep deprivation, gang rape, forced abortions, forced medication, forced feeding, physical torture, and brainwashing. Practitioners have been killed by being thrown off buildings, dragged to their deaths while tied to a motorcycle, burned alive, or beaten to death. The killers, usually policemen, are rewarded and promoted by the state.
My husband died. My husband's sister was sentenced 2 years in labor camp. My husband's father, shocked by the news his son's dead. His daughter's sentence, he passed away, leaving me alone to raise my 18-month-old baby. I urge everyone help us to stop this persecution, because in China, thousands families like us still suffering every day.
Many Western practitioners of Falun Gong have gone to Tiananmen Square to appeal against the persecution.
We went to China, we were illegally detained, we were interrogated, we were roughly treated, we had our property stolen, and we were deported. We broke no laws. This happened for no reason at all, except for the fact that we practice Falun Gong and we believe in truthfulness, compassion and forbearance.
And I was dragged out of the hostel and dragged by my hair onto a police bus
and taken to a detention center.
At the police station, I saw a lot of Western practitioners being beaten and abused by the police. And inside another detention center, a police officer came up to me and slapped me in the face with such force that my head was smashed against the wall.
They beat me 3 times, pulling my hair, punching me, kicking me, kicked me when I'm on the ground, elbowing me in the back, punching me in the back, using the walkie-talkie to smash me in the back, twisting my fingers, kneeing me in the stomach, anything they could think of. It was really strange. You'd see their face change. They're so deceptive. They talk to you like, oh, we're friends, blah, blah, blah. And then you say, Falun Dafa, how? And they come down on you like a ton of bricks. I really fear for the Chinese practitioners because I knew, as a Western practitioner, maybe I was getting, an easy deal.
We are not doing anything wrong, only following truthfulness, compassion, forbearance. So to arrest people for doing that, especially elderly people, like people in their 80s, and also young children and students like me, is very wrong.
Peaceful protest is an alien concept to the Chinese communist dictatorship. And in this country, we're a liberal democracy, we enjoy the right to demonstrate and express our views in a peaceful manner. Chinese government can't cope with that. It can't cope with its own citizens doing it, and it certainly can't cope with with Western Europeans doing it. So the way the 4 Britons were treated in Tiananmen Square is pretty typical, frankly, of the heavy-handed attitude which the Chinese government takes to protesters. In a way, they were lucky because they were British citizens. They were just deported. If they'd been Chinese, no doubt they'd have been carted off to a labour camp.
Since 1999, 250 adherents have been killed. According to international media reports, 50,000 Falun Gong practitioners have been arrested and detained. The whole world will be watching, and we will over and over and over again call on the government in Beijing to respect the full rights of all of the citizens. That is why we're here, and that is why I support you as a United States Senator. Falun Gong, thank you so much for inviting me.
Oppression anywhere, in any form, is unacceptable. And we have a huge opportunity with the People's Republic at the moment because they are trying to build their economy. They can't do that alone. They need to trade with nations like the UK, with Australia and with the United States. They can't build their economy without us, and we should be making it a condition of trade with them, of helping them build their economy, that they take a more liberal attitude to human rights, starting with Falun Gong, returning to the position that they had in respect to Falun Gong before 1999, but also improving the human rights of all minority groups and religious groups in China.
If you turn a blind eye to dictatorships, whether it was Hitler in the 1930s, whether it was Saddam Hussein in Iraq, Colonel Gaddafi in Libya or whatever, eventually these dictatorships think that the liberal democracies don't care what they do and they can get away with literally murder. Saddam Hussein got away with gassing tens of thousands of his own citizens. In China, they're currently getting away with persecuting, thousands of Falun Gong practitioners. It mustn't be allowed to happen. The next stage on is genocide. Hitler got away in the 1930s with persecuting the Jewish community and other communities in Germany. That turned into genocide in the 1940s. The next stage is the gas chambers.
You all people gathered here, you are signs of truthfulness, of compassion, and of forbearance. You set an example for Europe and for the entire world of good values and working for the best of the human person. Do not stop with your work, because the right to meditate, the right to pray, the right to think your own thoughts in love and in peacefulness, as you are the best of the human person. You stand for the good, continue with that. Your followers in China have been and are persecuted. More than 200 people of your followers in China have been killed. They have been killed in a brutal way. They have done nothing. But the Chinese communist regime
They know that they have not been able to win the souls and the hearts of the Chinese people. You are reaching the souls and the heart of the Chinese people. Let us jointly, for a better future on this planet, on this world, work together for these just values, for the good cause of freedom, democracy, and the dignity of the human person, and for religious liberties. God bless you all. Thank you so much for letting me speak to you. Thank you.
In May of 1992, Mr. Li Hongzhi revealed to the world a unique Qigong practice known as Falun Gong or Falun Dafa, which consists of 5 sets of gentle, slow-moving exercises and a profound spiritual philosophy. In 1996, Mr. Li's book, Zhuan Falun, became a national bestseller in China. A few years later, a survey by the Communist Party revealed that the number of Falun Gong practitioners in China had grown to between 70 and 100 million, more than the entire membership of the Chinese Communist Party itself. Moreover, many party members were also practicing Falun Gong. Falun Gong is deeply rooted in traditional Chinese culture. Soon it spread rapidly to more than 40 countries throughout the world. To have so many people involved in something that transcends the communist ideology, promotes independent thinking, and elevates each individual's spirit was a challenge to the party's top leader. On July 22nd, Communist Party leader Jiang Zemin proclaimed that Falun Gong was now illegal and that henceforth any citizens who practiced Falun Gong, petitioned or appealed for Falun Gong, or assembled together with others for the purpose of exchanging and spreading information about Falun Gong would be arrested and punished. The nationwide attack on Falun Gong came on like a violent thunderstorm. It was compared by many old-timers to the Cultural Revolution launched by Chairman Mao over 30 years ago, during which time many innocent citizens had their human rights abolished and were treated like enemies of the state. Given the brutality of the government's attack upon many of its citizens, it is not surprising that reports of torture and death soon started emerging from China's jails, detention centers, and labor camps. On April 20th, 2000, the Wall Street Journal reported from Weifeng, China, the day before Chen Shiju died, her captors again demanded that she renounce her faith in Falun Dafa. Barely conscious after repeated jolts from a cattle prod, the 58-year-old woman stubbornly shook her head. Enraged, the local officials ordered Mrs. Chen to run barefoot in the snow. 2 days of torture had left her legs bruised and her short black hair matted with pus and blood, according to cellmates and other prisoners who witnessed the incident. She crawled outside, vomited, and collapsed. She never regained consciousness and died on February 21st. Liu Yofeng, 64, was a retired worker from Wandong City. On the morning of July 18, 2000, Liu was detained because he took part in a group practice session at Huilong Mountain. On July 23rd, Liu died from being severely beaten and tortured. An autopsy reveals cuts and bruises on his face and black and blue marks left by electric shocks on his throat, chest, and legs. His ribs on both sides were fractured. For practicing Falun Gong in a park, Ms. Jiao Xin, a 32-year-old university professor, was detained at the Haidian police substation in Beijing. A few days later, she was admitted to the hospital, still wearing handcuffs and shackles, with 3 broken vertebrae in her neck. She suffered from extreme pain for 6 months before she died. The Washington Post reported the case of practitioner Su Gang, a computer engineer who died after spending a week in a mental hospital, where doctors injected him twice daily with an unknown substance that made him lose mobility and finally led to heart failure. From AFP News on June 28, 2000, Jiao Xinli, a military officer, was placed in a mental hospital in Beijing and injected with a drug which damaged his nervous system. This left him physically weak and disoriented. Reports have been released of women being sexually abused in a variety of ways. This includes being shocked with electric batons in their vaginas and being stripped naked and thrown into cells with male criminals. The Falun Gong crackdown is not limited to Chinese nationals.
It seems Mayor Randy Vopel was about to issue a simple proclamation honoring the Falun Gong movement, when what should appear in his mailbox but a letter from the Consulate General of the People's Republic of China asking Vopel sort of politely not to do that.
I was chilled to the bones that a communist nation would go to this extent to suppress someone's freedom of action in this country. That's what really bothered me.
Australian citizen Zhang Suiying was detained for 8 months because she went to China to appeal during the annual meeting of the People's Congress. While in jail, she was forced to work more than 10 hours a day and suffered humiliation in front of male guards. On November 15, 2000, without benefit of trial, Professor Jiang Kunlun, a Canadian citizen, was sentenced to 3 years in a Chinese labor camp for peacefully practicing Falun Gong exercises in a public park. Due to international pressure, he was released after serving 2 months of his sentence. Many organizations and governments around the world have condemned China for its persecution of Falun Gong practitioners. These same organizations persevere to reveal the truth about Falun Gong. Most recently, on March 14th, Freedom House, the world's oldest organization that monitors human rights, honored Mr. Li Hongzhi and Falun Dafa with the International Religious Freedom Award of 2001. Despite these gallant efforts, the persecution still continues. To date, over 50,000 practitioners have been detained. At least 10,000 have been sent to labor camps without trial. 150 have been sentenced to extended jail terms. Over 1,000 have been illegally sent to be tortured in mental hospitals. 172 people have died as a result of police torture. can help to stop this brutality now. While tens of millions of Falun Gong practitioners in China have been deprived of their freedom to speak, you still can.